Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Greetings, friends, and welcome to this February 6th, 2014 edition of Nightcast. Tonight in the news, we're back to weather again. The UK floods, giant wave crashes over a Cornwall restaurant. Famous restaurant in the UK. Amateur footage has captured the moment a giant wave crashed over the Schooners restaurant in St. Agnes, Cornwall. The wave struck the restaurant and beach huts at a famous cove earlier this morning in England. And friends, we'll come back to that story in a moment with more that's been happening in the UK in the way of flooding. But large parts of Europe have been hit by severe weather with snow, rain, and high winds causing disruption in several countries. Houses in Australia were buried under a thick blanket of snow, as the BBC's Rebecca Donovan reports.
It seems Austria is the latest country to feel the force of severe weather sweeping Europe. These men aren't just shoveling snow, they're trying to unearth houses buried beneath a thick blanket of white.
We have already reached the load limit. Any further snow, we can't rule out that there won't be more downpours, might overstrain the statics of the roof. That's why we should remove the excess snow.
Around 1,000 households have now been left without electricity. Meanwhile, this aerial footage shows treetops being felled. The army has been trying to get to them before they snap under the weight of the snow. Felling is not the only solution, though. The army has come up with a novel technique using helicopters.
The helicopters are here to remove snow from the trees, since they are prone to breaking and falling on the streets. It works with the so-called downwash principle. That means that the rotor blades produce a downstream that's actually a problem, but in this case it's very useful.
The forecast for Europe remains unsettled, with more outbreaks of snow and strong winds possible.
And friends, we have for you some amateur video footage actually shot by a cell phone, filmed at the height of the bad weather yesterday and today in southwest England, showing the intensity of the storms there. Again, this is mobile phone footage from members of the public that captured the stormy seas with high winds and ocean foam hitting the coastline. While we play some more of that mobile phone footage, we'll tell you what's happening in the United States. There are still 500,000 people without power after the U.S. ice storms hit here. We actually had them snow here in Alabama at about 5 o'clock in the afternoon today, just a couple hours before our live broadcast tonight. The storm, a mix of ice and snow, created hurricane-like damage to power lines. A power cut affected more than 450,000 people in the Philadelphia area and 70,000 more in the state of Maryland, electric companies said. Fallen trees sheltered in a thick coat of ice slowed recovery efforts. The damage is very similar to what we see during hurricanes, a Pennsylvania state official said. The damage that we're seeing in the field with the number of trees down, not only on lines, but blocking roads and more, presents a number of logistical issues, said the official Public Utility Commission spokeswoman Jennifer Kocher. There's a little more we have on the weather from the United States before we go to our next story, friends. The Philadelphia region's main utility company said repair efforts would extend through the weekend, although many would see their power restored by tomorrow on Friday. It was the firm's second worst power cut after Superstorm Sandy in October 2012. The first month of 2014 has already seen severe winter storms with heavy snowfall in the region. Yesterday's storm dumped more than a foot, more than 30.5 centimeters of snow, forcing schools, companies, and government offices to close and snarling the densely populated region's transport network, and left more than a quarter-inch of ice coating a large section of the state of Pennsylvania. And then, friends, related to the U.S., now that's the United States weather, related to what's happening overseas with the sports events going there, the U.S. bans carry-on liquids on direct flights to Russia. The BBC's Daniel Sanford in Sisi says there's a strong security presence at the airport. The U.S. government has banned all liquids from carry-on bags on nonstop flights to Russia on the eve of the Sisi winter.
Organisers of the Olympics will have hoped that once the sport started, the discussions about security would stop. Well, today the sport has started. Some of the preliminary rounds of the slope style and of the ice skating of the moguls events have started, but still the discussions are going on about security. You can see here at Sochi Airport the soldiers stationed every 100 metres all around the perimeter of defence. A lot of the focus on security has been around airline security here in the build-up to the Games, and today we heard one of the reasons why. The US authorities warning airlines of the possibility of explosives in toothpaste tubes being taken onto planes heading to Russia, and that chimes with something that we've seen here in Russia in the last month, where we've seen warnings to airlines that they shouldn't allow people with any liquids or any gels or any pastes being allowed onto airplanes at all, not even the 100 millilitres that's normally allowed internationally. There's a complete ban at the moment in Russia on taking pastes, gels and liquids into aircraft. The security here is extreme down at the Olympic Park as well. The anti-aircraft missile battery there looking down on the park, and on the road it runs up this valley to the venues in the mountains where the skiing and snowboarding events are. There's police officers in the woods there and soldiers in the woods guarding the road all the way up the hills. The security is very tight, but when you get inside the venues, it's just like any other sporting event.
And friends, if the United States doesn't have enough problems, today, I think I may have gone too far with that video. Let me back this up for a moment. Check something. Yeah, okay. All right, now we got the right one queued up. Related to the Ukraine crisis, leaked U.S. phone call appears online. An apparently hacked phone conversation during which a senior U.S. diplomat disparages the EU over the Ukraine crisis has been posted online. A voice resembling that of Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland reportedly refers to the EU using a graphic swear word. The U.S. said Ms. Nuland had apologized for these reported comments. The audio also reveals a frank exchange about America's strategy on how to work with Ukraine's main opposition leaders. Mark Mardell has this report.
The storm is still brewing. Behind the bravado, the banging of batons, a profound tussle whether Ukraine faces east or west, whether it does its deals with Russia or Europe. Protesters marched proclaiming, "We are tired of waiting." They're not the only ones who are frustrated. So apparently is America, dismissive of the European Union's handling of this crisis. The US Ambassador and the Assistant Secretary of State Victoria Nuland have worked arm in arm, just how closely revealed in a conversation posted anonymously on YouTube. It reveals them plotting who should and shouldn't be in a new Ukrainian government. But this is the surprise.
So that would be great, I think, to help glue this thing and have the UN help glue it. And, the EU.
After dismissing the EU with that curse, this on the Russians.
No, exactly. And I think we've got to do something to make it stick together, because you can be pretty sure that if it does start to gain altitude, the Russians will be working behind the scenes to try to torpedo it.
The ambassador tweeted a picture of Victoria Nuland with opposition leaders. The White House seemed a bit embarrassed.
I would say that
it's not private
since
anymore.
the video was first noted and tweeted out by the Russian government, I think it says something about Russia's role, but the content of the conversation is not something I'm going to comment on.
An awkward handshake between Victoria Nuland and Ukraine's hardline president after suffering months of revelations that it spied on its friends. Some will delight that American frankness has now been caught on tape, but one former diplomat says it'll blow over.
The United States is able to act much more quickly in a crisis than the EU is able to act. Certainly EU and American interests in Ukraine are very similar, and both sides understand that. So from time to time, Washington becomes impatient with the length of time it takes the EU to act.
Being caught scornfully swearing about your allies is, well, humiliating. But the real revelation is the depth of America's involvement in this crisis. It's not the Cold War, but it is an important struggle. Mark Mardell, BBC News, Washington.
Thank you, Mark. And friends, in Pakistan, the first formal meeting between the Pakistan government and a Taliban-nominated team has been held at an undisclosed location, officials say. The session, which has now ended, was aimed at charting a roadmap for peace talks to end a decade-long insurgency, as Shazeb Jalani reports from Islamabad.
It means identifying negotiating points, which are far from clear at this point. The Taliban have said they want Americans to leave this region. They want to impose Sharia, Islamic law, across Pakistan. The government says it wants peace. It's not entirely clear how they will go about negotiating this and what could be a meeting point. Remember, Taliban are responsible. They have proudly claimed responsibility for killing scores of people, thousands of people in Pakistan in the last 1 decade, in suicide bombings, in targeted attacks, kidnappings, beheadings of civilians as well as armed forces. And it's not very clear how peace will be brought. They haven't declared a ceasefire yet, but the government of Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif has invested a lot of hope into this process. Today is the first meeting, and they will be deciding the agenda essentially for the days to come.
And do we have any sense of timetable? I mean, do we know, for example, when the next meeting is going to be?
No, we don't know when they will meet again. Even today, as the meeting is underway, we don't know where they're meeting. It's at an undisclosed location. This meeting was supposed to take place 2 days ago. They didn't meet because of some procedural differences. And on the same day, we had a suicide bombing in the city of Peshawar, where about 8 people were killed and dozens were wounded. So there are a lot of people who are skeptical about these talks, and they believe that unless they are willing to lay down arms, it doesn't show their seriousness. The other big problem is Taliban are not a united group. There are groups within Taliban who are opposed to these talks and will continue to launch their attacks. And hence, a lot of skepticism whether this will lead anywhere.
Okay, thank you. Friends, next we go to Egypt with Orla Gorin. Greetings, Orla. Egypt's military has denied that its Chief of Staff, Field Marshal Abdul Fattah al-Sisi, told a Kuwaiti newspaper he would run for president. Now, Orla, if you're going to repeat all this, then maybe I should save what I'm going to have to say after your report. Let's see what Orla has on this story out of Egypt.
Well, it's taken the army quite some time to make a response to this report that came in the Kuwaiti newspaper, but as you say, it has now done so. It has issued a statement saying that that story from Kuwait was what it called journalistic conjecture and extrapolation. It said that the comments attributed to Field Marshal Abdel Fattah al-Sisi were not direct quotes, and it said any decision on whether or not he would run for the presidency would be made by him in front of, as the army put it, the great Egyptian people. So interestingly, it's saying this is not the announcement, that the Kuwaiti newspaper report is inaccurate or at least exaggerated, but it is not saying that he will not be standing for the presidency. And I think it would be a great surprise if it turned out that he was not a candidate. All of the indications in the last few weeks have been that he will be running for the presidency. We saw the Army Council giving him the green light very publicly at the end of January, saying that the trust of the people was a call that must be heeded. And on the same day, they promoted him to the highest rank, the rank of Field Marshal, which was seen by many as a kind of a farewell gesture, because he'll have to step down from the military in order to be a candidate. So still no statement from Field Marshal Sisi himself. We do know from European diplomats who've met him in recent weeks that he is said to be quite troubled by this decision, very conscious of the burden that will come on his shoulders, very aware of the pitfalls, of all of the challenges on the economic and political and security front. But he himself has said consistently in recent weeks and months that he would heed the call of the people. He would listen to what the people wanted. And certainly there is a perceptible clamour on the part of many to see him standing in the election and becoming president of Egypt.
Okay, thank you, Orla. The report that Orla Gorin was talking about was published last night, and it was said that it was not accurate and had been a misrepresentation of his words. Friends, that's it for tonight. Thank you for joining me on this Thursday night. That's it until Sunday evening. We don't do a report on Friday or night or Saturday night. We take a break, and hopefully the snowy, icy weather won't knock out our power lines. We do have emergency power here if we need it. I got to make sure we've got enough gasoline in the tanks to run those emergency generators, just in case. So tomorrow I plan on slipping out to get some of that. We already had snow come in here about 5 o'clock this afternoon, 2.5 hours before broadcast time here in Alabama. And it's let up already, though. Thankfully, we're in a little bit of a break, and I hope that'll be it for a while, actually, here. But it is cold. But God willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll be back again Sunday night. We'll also be here on the weekend for those of you who tune in on our private service, member service channel. But until next time, this is your host, Stephen Lloyd, saying, so long, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on COGTV.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the COGTV.org video archive.